Bush loyalists love to seize on meaningless quotes by Democrats to bolster their beliefs. Never mind they are clinging to the word of people who spend their lives immersed in ulterior motives. Some circles call that evidence. I call it cowardice. Republican Representative Walter Jones became one of the few who had the courage to admit that he was wrong, and even confessed that his vote was politically motivated. You can tell this guy is sincere in the following clip, and I have no desire to disparage him. I respect that he has the integrity for remorse. I offer his admission only to further illustrate how the war was rigged. What's done is done. But it takes a lot of courage to come clean, which is something Colin Powell seems entirely incapable of.
If I'd read the national intelligence estimate on Iraq, I probably would have I've done myself a favor by being better informed on the intelligence rather than listening to the administration. In my heart, I knew that a no to the authority for the president was the right vote, but yet I was not strong enough to vote my conscience. More concerned about the politics of my decision rather than what is right and what is wrong.
One of the finest moments I've ever seen on cable news was when Joe Scarborough took Chris Matthews to task for his over-the-top allegiance to Obama.
You know what? I want to do everything I can to make this thing work, this new presidency work, and I think that the successful model.
You just talked about
yeah, that's my job.
So
my
your
job is to help this country.
Is to make this presidency work.
To make this work successfully, because this country needs a successful presidency more than anything right now.
Even by the non-journalistic standards of cable news, that vastly lowers the bar. Unfortunately, Scarborough's scrutiny was not so sharp when it mattered most. His nightly show Scarborough Country ran from April 2003 through June 2007. In all those episodes over 4 years, the only time he ever mentioned the aluminum tubes was on January 26, 2005, and only because he was defending Condoleezza Rice over a cartoon. The next time the tubes came up was later that year on December 7th, with some back and forth between Scarborough and Al Franken over George Tenet's slam dunk assertion. Scarborough seized on that declaration as evidence to absolve Bush of any wrongdoing on the WMD debacle. The following scene took place on December 21, 2002, and is from Bob Woodward's second book in his 4-part series on the Bush administration. Plan of attack. When Deputy CIA Director John McLaughlin concluded his WMD presentation, there was a look on the president's face of, "What's this?" "Nice try," Bush said. "I don't think this is something that Joe Public would understand or gain a lot of confidence from." Chief of Staff Andy Carr was also underwhelmed. The presentation was a flop. In terms of marketing, the examples didn't work, the charts didn't work, the photos were not gripping, the intercepts were less than compelling. Bush turned to Tenet. "I've been told about all this intelligence about having WMD and this is the best we've got?" "Don't worry, it's a slam dunk," Tenet said. It should be incredibly telling that the president accepted Tenet's affirmation at face value. His triumphant efforts to soothe the president's concerns smacks of someone eager to please. And take notice of the fact that Bush wasn't worried about whether or not there were WMDs. He was only concerned about the weakness of the sales pitch. Tenet would later say that slam dunk were the 2 dumbest words he ever said. And therein lies the question. It somehow escaped Scarborough that in all his obsession over the fact that Tenet said it was a slam dunk, the real question is why he said it. Franken tried to address the tubes, but Scarborough evaded the issue by redirecting the discussion back to the narrative he wants to spin. Your guest raised a critical point, Joe, but rather than show him some courtesy and maybe even an ounce of curiosity, your very next words were, "All right, Al, let me ask you this question." It amazes me that people can pull that stunt and still see themselves as a bastion of civility. Rather than take the opposition's argument into account, Scarborough skated right on by it. Defenders of the faith are what I call the believers in the faith-based intelligence that Greg Thielman coined. They are so fixated on protecting their platform that they will isolate anything to defend the indefensible.
But I submit to you, and I was a supporter of the Iraq War, okay? I don't blame you for weapons of mass destruction. I think that the data we had, anybody could have made that mistake. New York Times had it on the front page. They had weapons of mass destruction. But the way the war was waged, come on. That was a big screw-up. We didn't have enough troops there. We underestimated the problems there, didn't we?
Bill, you acted like Rumsfeld just ran a red light. It can happen to anybody. And you'd think that someone in O'Reilly's role would know after 9 years that the New York Times tale was total bunk. And while I give him credit for rebuking Rumsfeld on the war itself, Incisive inquiry demands far more than making critical commentary on the readily obvious. Reading up on the aluminum tubes actually takes a little effort, and O'Reilly never budged one bit in that direction.
Have you seen the National Intelligence Estimate that was provided in October of 2002, in which the intelligence agency under the State Department said that Iraq was not building up a nuclear capability, that this whole story about the aluminum tubes was completely off base?
We had William Cohen, Secretary of Defense, on here under President Clinton. He believed, and so did President Clinton, that Saddam had weapons of mass destruction. Mayor, very instructive.
Well,
we appreciate you coming on the program. And we got to go because it's only an hour program.
Bill.
I know I am. I appreciate it.
A 1-hour program that runs 5 days a week, and yet in its entire history, O'Reilly has never even uttered the words aluminum tubes. It just doesn't register with the likes of O'Reilly that what Clinton and Cohen thought is entirely irrelevant to the tubes. But smugly circulating invalid arguments is the way of the world now. When debating our various views, we would do well to remember the wisdom of the deer hunter.
Stanley, see this? This is this. This ain't something else. This is this.
That 5-second scene is the essence of arguing on the merits, which means to stay true to the topic at hand. More specifically, let's look at the definition of merits, since not everyone understands it and so few practice it. From thefreedictionary.com, merits are the intrinsic rights and wrongs of an issue, as distinct from extraneous matters and technicalities, the factual content of a matter, apart from emotional considerations. Citing outdated and generic claims from Democrats is an emotional response to outright reject opposing arguments in a wholesale manner. That is the epitome of spin, to engineer an illusion, to make you believe that something meaningless has substance.